I bought a house in secret, then discovered my daughter-in-law was plotting to use it for her family. The steam from my morning coffee still lingered in the air when the notification popped up on my phone. I tapped the screen and froze. There she was, my daughter-in-law, Samantha, standing confidently on the porch of my brand new Victorian home on Maplewood Avenue. She reached into her purse, pulled out a glinting silver key, and glanced around before slipping it into the lock. The camera zoomed in on her puzzled face as the key refused to turn. She tried again, harder this time, her lips tightening with irritation. Watching from my living room, I stayed perfectly still, the cup warm in my hands. What she didn't know was that 24 hours earlier, I had replaced every lock and installed cameras at every entrance. It hadn't been cheap, but as I watched her fruitless struggle, I knew it was the smartest decision I'd made in years. Her expression shifted from annoyance to disbelief. She pulled out her phone and called my son, Eric, gesturing angrily at the locked door. Though I couldn't hear her, I didn't need sound to know the tale she was spinning. Perhaps she would claim the locks had been tampered with, or that some mistake had been made. Maybe she'd even suggest strangers had broken in. But I knew better. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't confusion. Samantha had a key to a house she had no right to enter, a house I had purchased in secret, intending to secure my own future. I set the coffee down slowly and leaned back, a bittersweet calm washing over me. For months, I had wondered if my instincts were wrong, if grief had made me too suspicious. But there, on the glowing screen, was undeniable proof. People often say, betrayal comes from outsiders, from people lurking beyond the walls of your life. But I've learned that isn't true. The deepest cuts, the ones that scar the most, come from those you trust most, the ones who smile at your table and call you family. My name is Helen Montgomery. I'm 64 years old, and not long ago, I buried my husband, David, after his long battle with heart disease. We had spent nearly 4 decades together in a quiet Pennsylvania town, building a life out of small traditions and simple joys. Even after he was gone, I still found myself setting 2 plates at the dinner table, forgetting there would be no one to sit across from me. The silence of widowhood was unbearable, heavy in ways I hadn't expected. And into that silence stepped my son, Eric, and his wife, Samantha. They arrived with polished smiles and comforting meals, speaking in gentle tones that seemed, at first, like kindness. I wanted to believe it. I wanted to see their visits as love, not strategy. But as I watched Samantha fumble with a stolen key, one truth settled firmly in my chest. Their concern had never been about me. It had always been about what I had left behind. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, the camera footage playing on repeat in my mind. Samantha's face, so certain, so entitled, haunted me. She hadn't looked like a woman making a mistake. She had looked like someone who believed she belonged there. When Eric called later that day, his tone was casual, almost too casual. "Mom, everything okay? Samantha said she had some trouble with your door yesterday." I paused, letting the silence stretch. My son had a habit of filling silence with explanations, and I wanted to hear what story he'd spin this time. "New locks," I finally said, keeping my voice steady. "Decided it was time for an upgrade." Eric chuckled nervously. "Ah, that explains it. Samantha thought maybe the key was faulty." "The key," I repeated softly, knowing full well he'd hear the edge in my voice. "Eric, why would she have a key in the first place?" There it was, the catch in his breath, the hesitation. "Well, just in case." Emergencies and all that, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the sunlight spilling across the floor. Emergencies. That word echoed in my head. For months after David's death, Samantha had been helping me with bills, offering to run errands, even suggesting she take over organizing my accounts to make things easier. At the time, I chalked it up to kindness. Now I saw the careful weaving of control. "I see," I said finally, though my stomach churned. Funny thing is, Eric, I never gave her a key. The silence on the other end was thick, suffocating. Then, almost too quickly, he laughed. Maybe you forgot? With everything you've been through, I cut him off. Eric, I may forget where I leave my reading glasses, but I do not forget giving someone access to my home. The weight of my words seemed to sink in. He cleared his throat, muttered something about calling me later, and hung up. For a long while, I just sat there, staring at the phone in my hand. It was a strange thing, realizing your own child might be standing on the other side of betrayal. When David was alive, Eric had always been the boy who asked for advice, who came to us when he was uncertain. But now, under Samantha's influence, he was different. Sharper around the edges, less patient, less mine. That night, as I washed the dinner dishes, I thought about the way Samantha had slipped into our family. She'd been charming at first, all compliments and eager gestures. But behind every smile was a subtle push, a suggestion here, a decision there, until one day I woke up and realized she wasn't just Eric's wife. She was the voice guiding him, pulling him away from me and towards something else. Controlled. I dried my hands and looked out the window, the yard dim under the fading twilight. The locks were changed, the cameras installed, but I knew this wasn't over. People like Samantha didn't give up easily, and for the first time in my life, I felt a fire I hadn't felt in years, the resolve not just to protect my home, but to protect myself. 2 days passed before I saw her again. I had just returned from the grocery store, a paper bag tucked under my arm, when I noticed a car idling across the street. Samantha sat in the driver's seat, her sunglasses hiding her eyes but not her intent. I didn't wave. I didn't even pause. I simply carried my groceries inside, locking the door behind me. A few minutes later, the engine roared to life, and the car pulled away. That night, Eric called again. His voice was tight, rehearsed. "Mom, Samantha feels unwelcome. She said you've been cold lately. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Eric, your wife tried to use a key to break into my home. How exactly should I greet her? With tea and biscuits?" He sighed heavily. "She thought she was helping." "You're alone, Mom. She worries about you." I gripped the phone tighter. "Eric, what I need is respect, not pity. I've lived in this world longer than either of you. Don't confuse age with helplessness." For a moment, there was silence. I could almost hear the conflict in him, the tug-of-war between his loyalty to me and the sway of his wife. Finally, he muttered, "We'll talk later," and hung up. I sat there in the quiet, staring at the empty chair across from me where David used to sit. He would have known what to say. He always had a way of cutting through pretense, of reminding Eric where his roots were. But with him gone, it was as if the anchor had lifted and the tide had pulled my son into waters I couldn't reach. The following afternoon, I caught Samantha again. This time, she wasn't across the street. She was in my backyard, standing by the old oak tree, pretending to talk on her phone. I watched her through the kitchen window, her heels sinking slightly into the grass. She glanced at the back door twice before finally leaving. It wasn't just arrogance anymore. It was persistence. And persistence had a purpose. I called my lawyer that evening, not for a lawsuit, not yet. I simply needed advice. When I explained the situation, he listened carefully and said, "Helen, what you're describing isn't about family. It's about control of assets. If they're circling, it's because they think you're vulnerable. Don't let them write your story for you." His words lit something inside me. Vulnerable. That was what Samantha saw when she looked at me, a widow with fading strength, easy to corner, easy to outmaneuver. But she was wrong. That night, I pulled out the folder where I kept all my important documents, the deed to the house, insurance papers, and financial records. I spread them across the table, reviewing each page carefully. If Samantha thought she could quietly weave herself into my life and my home, she was about to learn that I was not the kind of woman who folded under pressure. As I tucked the papers away, I caught my reflection in the window. My face bore the lines of age, but my eyes burned with something fiercer, resolve. Samantha thought she knew me. She thought she could read me like an open book. But she hadn't even turned the first page. It happened on a Sunday afternoon, the kind of day David and I used to spend tending the garden. I was trimming the rose bushes when I heard the crunch of gravel in the driveway, Eric's car, and beside him, stepping out with a practiced smile, was Samantha. I wiped my hands on my apron and waited by the porch. They walked up together, Eric looking uneasy, Samantha radiating confidence as though she already owned the place. "Mom," Eric started, his voice cautious, "we need to talk." I folded my arms. "Yes, we do." Samantha wasted no time. "Helen, I think we've gotten off on the wrong foot. We're family. We should trust each other." "Trust?" I repeated, my voice cool. "Trust doesn't come from sneaking around my property or carrying keys I never gave you." Her smile faltered, but only slightly. "I was just trying to help. You're alone now and Eric worries. We both do." Eric shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. He opened his mouth, but I held up my hand. "No, Eric. Let's speak plainly. I've buried my husband, yes. I've faced loneliness, yes. But do not mistake my grief for weakness. I am not someone who needs a keeper." The words seemed to hang in the air, heavy and sharp. Samantha's mask cracked just enough to reveal the steel beneath. "Helen, we only want what's best for you. Maybe this house is too much. Maybe your finances—" That was it. The moment her true intentions slipped out. "My finances are not your concern," I said firmly. "This house is not your concern. The only reason you want keys, access, and influence is because you see me as a stepping stone to what I've worked for." Eric's face flushed. "Mom." I turned to him, softer now, though my heart ached. "Eric, you are my son. I love you. But you need to understand something. Love does not mean entitlement. Your father and I built this life together. It is not yours to take. It is mine to decide what to do with." For the first time, Samantha's confidence faltered completely. She stared at me, speechless, her hands tightening into fists. Eric looked down, shame coloring his features. He muttered something about needing to leave, and without another word, they turned and walked back to the car. As their taillights disappeared down the road, I stood there on the porch, the late afternoon sun spilling across the garden. My hands trembled slightly, but it wasn't from fear. It was from release, the kind that comes after finally speaking the truth aloud. Inside, I brewed myself a cup of tea and sat at the kitchen table, the house quiet around me. The cameras still recorded, the lock still held firm, and for the first time in months, I felt secure. Not because I had stronger doors, but because I had stronger boundaries. Samantha might circle again. She might scheme in new ways, but she would no longer catch me unaware, because now she knew the truth. Helen Montgomery was not a woman to be underestimated.